People don't call an attorney because their life is going well. You didn't know you were going to need legal help, but when you do, you need legal advice you can trust from an attorney who will help. Stephen P. Kelly will listen to your problem and know what the next steps should be. If you want a plan with results, let Stephen P. Kelly protect you. Stephen P. Kelly will help you explore your options and navigate the legal system.
Welcome to Ask the Attorney, brought to you by Stephen Kelly Law.
Well, hi, everybody. Good evening. Thanks for joining us tonight. I'm Renee Charles, your host of Ask the Attorney, and tonight I'm joined by Steve Kelly. He's a workers' compensation and personal injury attorney, and he represents clients and employers all throughout the state of Illinois. So, Steve, welcome.
Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it.
Glad to be here with you. And the topic tonight that we're going to talk about is workers' compensation, but we want to really talk about how you get it started, how you resolve it, kind of educating people on what they need to know. But before we get to it, I want to let people know we are going to take your questions. So if you have questions for Steve, you can call us. The number is 698-3742. That's 698-3742. Start calling us now, and we will bring your questions in as we're chatting here for the next 30 minutes or so. But I want people to get to know you first. So I want to tell them a little bit about you. You're Peoria, born and raised?
Born and raised, went to school in Peoria. Went to a local high school, Spalding, and then also went to St. Ambrose for college. Then went to Chicago for law school after college. Was a great experience being in a big city. Learned a lot there. And then I wanted to come back to Peoria. And so I was hired by an insurance defense firm. Started there in 1989 and was there and started there till about 1992. And at that point, they asked me to go down to Springfield, Illinois and open an office for them in Springfield. And so from that point, for about 6 years, I ran a firm in Springfield for that firm and got back to Peoria in 1998 and been back ever since.
And what made you want to open your own?
I wanted an opportunity to do different types of work. In the firm I was with before, we did one type of work. And in 2014, opened up my own office. It's on Knoxville Avenue, 2 blocks south of Forest Hill. And I wanted the opportunity to also represent first responders, injured people, but also do a little bit on online pension work for police officers and firemen. So it allowed me to do different type of work.
Well, when we get into workers' compensation here, we all know this can be very, very stressful when this happens because you need an attorney, which means things aren't obviously going great for you at the time. So the first thing I'm curious about is, how do you really even get started?
Yeah. Well, it's a great question, and you get started with an individual who gets injured at work. First of all, the first thing they should do is report the injury. That's very important for them, even before they go to an attorney. Not reporting an injury creates more problems for a case. So if you're an injured person, you get injured, you report that injury as soon as possible. And that starts the process. And the process begins on its own, and you start the medical treatment for the injury that you sustained.
So let's talk about resolution for the case, because really that's the end goal. People want to get this case resolved. So 2 options when it comes to the resolution. You can either go to trial, or you can settle. So let's talk about the timing for these, and where do you go and how do you know where to start?
In the settlement and trial, every attorney should sit down with their client, either side, the employer or the injured person, and talk about them. Is this the right time to settle the case? And in deciding whether you want to settle or deciding whether you want to try your case, you talk about the issues, what the case is worth, and you go through a game plan as to what you have to establish and what is the best route to go.
So what kind of time frame are we talking about here? Like, how long can a trial take? Is there really an average?
Right. The trial aspect can take itself, when the trial begins, is usually less than half a day. Because in trials and workers' compensation, we do take depositions of doctors, offer that into evidence. The long process of the trial is after that, when you receive a decision and when either party decides to appeal that case. That's when the process can get longer. There's a 4-step process in the appeal process, and in doing so, that can extend the case out to 2 to 3 years going through that appeal process.
Wow.
I discuss that with my clients and tell them, sometimes you want to prove someone wrong by going to trial. You may be right from a principle standpoint, but that doesn't settle your case and resolve the issues, and that also doesn't get the money
it could
that you may
take years for it to get settled.
And so sometimes my clients and I sit down and weigh out the options, and we talk about what's better. Is it better for you to prove them wrong, or is it better to settle the case and resolve the case, and that way ending all issues and getting money to the injured person faster, and for the employer, ending that comp case faster.
So what are your rights then if you decide, okay, we're going to trial, or you decide you're going to settle it? What are the rights when it comes to closing a case? And, for example, what does it take to get the monies? What's the time frame to get the settlement in?
So the biggest important right that you're closing out and settling the case is your medical rights. When you settle your case, more times than not, the employer is asking you to close out every aspect of your case. And there's 3 buckets in workers' compensation. There's medical expenses, there's off-work benefits, and there's also what the case is worth. And we've talked about that today. But when you are settling your case, the biggest right you're giving up is your medical expenses. When you settle a case and it's on paper, your rights are closed 99% of the time.
So how do you get someone ready? If they come to you and they say, okay, I decided I want to either go to trial or settle, how do you get them ready if they pick trial?
Right. So these cases are really decided upon credibility when they go to trial. And each witness is very important. And the arbitrator weighs the evidence in who the arbitrator believes. When you go to trial, the arbitrator really doesn't know you, doesn't know the employer.
They're impartial.
They're impartial. So it's the responsibility of each attorney to put a game plan together and present it to the arbitrator. And in doing so, you get the client in, you go through the medical records, you compare the medical records to what the testimony is going to be, and you make sure your client is credible and puts on a very respectable case. And in doing so, you go through the pros and cons of your case with your client, and you decide what the best aspect is to try the case.
And how many times do you maybe run into a situation where somebody says, I'm trial, I want this to happen, this is the way it's going to be, but after you talk through it, maybe they see that settlement might be the better idea? Is that put you in a difficult position?
It happens, because when there's a lawsuit, a lot of times there's harsh feelings on both sides. Sure. And so when the case is at the beginning and we're going through and parties take a stance, hard feelings develop. But a year later, when you're getting ready to resolve the case and you're talking to your client and you talk to them about the pros and cons of settlement, i.e., you can wait 3 years to prove them wrong, or you can settle the case and get the case over quickly. A lot of times clients listen to you and say, hey, I want to resolve the case. Now, if the client says no, they're your client,
right,
and you have to follow that path because they are the person who drives the case.
Okay. Well, we're going to take a quick break here, and then when we come back, I want to talk a little bit more about what some of the issues are that are involved. So when you're trying to determine whether you're going to go to trial or take a settlement, the issues that you recommend people think about. And don't forget, you can give us a call if you have a question for Steve. The number is 698-3742. We've got the lines open now. Folks are back there to take your calls. So give us a shout if you've got a question, and we'll take a break. We'll be right back.
People don't call an attorney because their life is going well. You didn't know you were going to need legal help, but when you do, you need legal advice you can trust from an attorney who will help. Stephen P. Kelly will listen to your problem and know what the next steps should be. If you want a plan with results, let Stephen P. Kelly protect you. Stephen P. Kelly will help you explore your options and navigate the legal system. People don't call an attorney because their life is going well. You didn't know you were going to need legal help, but when you do, you need legal advice you can trust from an attorney who will help. Stephen P. Kelly will listen to your problem and know what the next steps should be. If you want a plan with results, let Stephen P. Kelly protect you. Stephen P. Kelly will help you explore your options and navigate the legal system.
Well, welcome back. You're watching Ask the Attorney. I'm Renee Charles alongside attorney Steve Kelly. And we're talking about workers' compensation cases, and we are taking your calls. So if you have a question, feel free to give us a call. The number is 698-3742. And before I went to break, we did actually have someone send us a question here. And she said that her ribs were fractured at the chiropractor. Does she have a suit?
Not a workers' compensation case, more of a medical malpractice case, an issue. Those cases are more difficult than other cases. That has to be examined by a doctor and see whether or not there was negligence performed by that chiropractor. I would advise her to talk with the attorney, see if she does. She potentially could have a suit.
Okay. Well, let's jump back into that workers' compensation piece. What do you look at when deciding whether or not to go to trial or to settle? There's kind of a menu list of options that you look at to determine which route do we go.
Well, You look at each case and you look at the issues in the case, and there's multiple issues in a workers' compensation case. Some go in your favor, some don't. Sometimes the medical records don't support your client's history. And in evaluating whether or not to go to trial, it's my job to go through the medical records. It's my job to evaluate the case, and it's my job to tell my client, you know, I'm not here to tell you what you want to hear, but what you need to hear. And in that meeting with the client, we'll say, and my office will tell them, we'll say, you know, it's in your best interest to try to either resolve this, or you'll have a 50% chance. And we give them a percentage of what chance they're going to have to win the case. And ultimately, it's their decision whether or not they want to go to trial, but we will give them the best. And if we try the case, we'll do the best we can.
So one of the issues we want to talk about are medical bills.
Yeah.
How do you use that to determine which route you should go?
I want to say this about medical bills. Is probably, in my experience, the number one issue why people come to my office is because their medical bills are not being paid. And medical bills are something that we have to gather, determine what the amount is, and make sure that if the case is tried or settled, to make sure those bills are taken care of. Those are two big issues, because you don't want to try or settle a case and leave your client without medical bills being taken care of.
Okay. The off-work benefits, which you mentioned in our last segment, what does that mean?
So off-work benefits, a person's entitled to what they call temporary total disability benefits under work comp. We call it TTD. They're entitled to those benefits while they are off work by a doctor, as long as it's related to the work injury. So until...
Right, say that one more time.
Sure.
As long as...
As long as they're off work for a work injury, and they're off work because of that work injury, okay? So if you injure your hand and the doctor's got restrictions on you and the employer cannot accommodate them, you're entitled to off work benefits.
Is that for the entire life of this case, or is that for like a certain time frame?
Great question. Not the life of the case. What those benefits are for, it's a term called maximum medical improvement, and usually that means the doctor determines when you're done treating and you're able to go back to work. Once a doctor opines or gives an opinion you're able to go back to work, that will end that off-work benefit time period.
And does it, the type of the injury, or maybe the extent of the injury, you know, something minor versus something more significant, how does that play into all of this? I mean,
a large
sure
role.
It does.
A very large role. The more major the injury is, the longer the case usually takes to go. If you have a back injury that needs surgery, obviously recovery is longer than, let's just say, a wrist sprain. So yes, the more serious of an injury, the more longer the cases usually are protracted and medical care is given.
Does an arbitrator come into this particular piece of it here when you're looking at the issues, or is that something between you and your client?
Well, the arbitrator can come into play during the life of the case when the issues come up, when medical benefits aren't being paid or off-work benefits are at issue. We call that an emergency hearing. The attorney for the injured worker files an emergency hearing, and you can have a bifurcated hearing on two issues. And if you remember, I told you about the two buckets,
right?
Off-work benefits and also the medical bills. You can have a hearing on those two issues alone. It's called an emergency hearing. So certainly an arbitrator can step in during the process before the case is done.
Okay. Dale called us and wants to know, he had his workers' compensation bills were all paid, but he's still treating the injury. So how do you deal with something like that? Is there a type of settlement offer that he should be considering?
Well, I hope Bill's talking about they paid all his bills. He had a work injury, and now he's at max medical improvement, meaning that he's not going to get any more treatment. But if he's still treating, I wouldn't settle the case at this point, because there's going to be more bills that have to be taken care of. So I hope it's not a case where he settled and closed his case and he's getting more bills after that. So if he has not settled his case and his work comp case is still open, then he can go back to the work comp carrier and say, hey, I'm still getting treatment. I believe it's related. I think you should pay it.
And this kind of goes back to what we talked about in the earlier segment, where you said you really need to decide. If you're going to settle it, when you settle it, we're done.
We're done. And, you know, it's attorney's responsibility to make sure those bills are taken care of and make sure that they're all taken care of. If they're not all taken care of, it's also the attorney's responsibility to tell the client, hey, you've got $30,000 of bills, they're only going to pay 10. There may be an issue here, but it is the attorney's responsibility to let your client know those issues.
Another question here just came in, talking about the extent of an injury and the severity of an injury. Something like carpal tunnel, could that be considered workers' compensation? And if so, should they get an attorney for it?
Well, carpal tunnel is a recognized injury under workers' compensation. Lately, though, and the past leadership of the past governor carpal tunnel cases have become more difficult to prove, and they are tougher cases to prove that they're work-related. A lot of medical literature regarding what causes carpal tunnel. Is it something that's not related to work versus whether or not it's related to work?
Right. Can you pinpoint exactly how it happened?
That's why we have trials in these cases. And a lot of the issues are doctors giving opinions that, yes, you do enough repetitive work or you do work in a position that could bring on carpal tunnel. A lot of times carpal tunnel can come on its own. And those are one of the reasons we fight these cases. Medical opinions and the doctor's opinions and their involvement in the cases are very important with carpal tunnel. So the short answer to your question is yes, it is a recognizable workers' compensation injury, and you may be entitled to benefits, but there's also responsibility to you as an injured person to prove that that carpal tunnel is related to your work activities.
And that's probably one of the most important or the key components of this is you have to be able to prove that it happened at work, which is why you said first thing to do, report it.
The cases that usually have the hardest times or at least are not accepted is when you don't report the injury. And you got to think about it. When you have an injury, you're reporting it. You're telling the employer what's happening. The employer has a right to investigate it. And if they're not given the opportunity to investigate it, that creates some hard feelings, and that's where a lot of problems occur.
And you have to, or not have to, but you do represent employers and employees. So injured party and the other side. How do you deal with that?
I'm a unique bird. There's not a lot of attorneys that do that. We have a really strong technological conflict check system, so we don't have a conflict. But yes, when I started practicing law, it was all insurance work. And about 5 years ago, my injured person work really exploded. And how I do it is I represent a client. I hire them, they hire me, and they're my client. And I'll do the best I can for them, and I'll prosecute their case for both sides.
All right, so you do have to kind of balance how you handle a lot of these cases because you're used to dealing with both sides.
It's absolutely correct, but the issues are the same. You know, the workers' compensation issues are the same. You know, the injured person has to prove something, and the employer has to defend it, but they're the same issues. So the analysis when a client comes in, either an employer or an injured person, is the same. And when I take the case on and I look at it from the defense standpoint, if there's something there that doesn't make sense, we investigate it further. When an injured person comes in and talks to me and they give me a history and everything's matched up in the records and their story looks true, I will represent them.
All right, well, we're going to take another quick break. By the way, the phone number, you're welcome to give us a call if you have a question, 698-3742. That's 698-3742. And we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we've got a few more things we want to talk about when it comes to really evaluating and putting a value towards what your case could be. So stay tuned. We'll be right back.
People don't call an attorney because their life is going well. You didn't know you were going to need legal help, but when you do, you need legal advice you can trust from an attorney who will help. Stephen P. Kelly will listen to your problem and know what the next steps should be. If you want a plan with results, let Stephen P. Kelly protect you. Stephen P. Kelly will help you explore your options and navigate the legal system. People don't call an attorney because their life is going well. You didn't know you were going to need legal help, but when you do, you need legal advice you can trust from an attorney who will help. Stephen P. Kelly will listen to your problem and know what the next steps should be. If you want a plan with results, let Stephen P. Kelly protect you. Stephen P. Kelly will help you explore your options and navigate the legal system.
Well, welcome back, everyone. You're watching Ask the Attorney. I'm Renee Charles, joined by attorney Stephen Kelly. We're taking your calls. We're actually getting quite a few of them coming in. 698-3742. That's 698-3742. We're talking about workers' compensation, and some personal injury calls have come in too. Our focus, again, workers' compensation. And a couple questions I want to get to before we get back into how you can evaluate these. First of all, did you work at Nell and Kelly?
I was co-owner at Nell and Kelly.
Okay.
Was there for 18 years, so that was my former firm before I opened my own office in 2014.
And you do have an office right here in Peoria. Tell everybody where it is again.
It's on at 2710 North Knoxville, 2 blocks south of Forest Hill.
But you also have one in Princeton.
I do. My wife has a restaurant, Spoons, in Princeton. She's a Princeton girl. We bought the building, so my office is upstairs. We represent people in the Bureau County, and we actually represent a couple hospitals up there also.
Okay, so, and you also represent people all across the state of Illinois.
Yes.
Not just right here.
Exactly. People from Chicago down to Heron and Mount Vernon. We do the whole gamut.
Well, we do have a question from Marty here. We talked about this earlier, but let's reiterate it again. What's the timeline to fill out a workers' compensation claim? So is there a certain amount of time after your injury that you have to file this claim to get moving on it?
The law says 45 days, and 45 days is a long time. I never tell my clients, or I never encourage anyone who gets injured to wait 45 days, because I think it's reasonable for sometimes for an employer to question 30 days later, someone comes in and says, I had an injury, and they didn't report right away. So the law says 45 days, but I would encourage anyone who has a work injury to report it to the employer ASAP.
This is an interesting question from Mike. 12 years ago, he hurt his rotator cuff.
Yep.
Had surgery, 6 months off, really never got resolved. Recently re-injured it.
Okay.
So he's going to have surgery again, more than likely. Does he have a case here? How does the previous play into the current?
That's a great question. Pre-existing conditions can be a work-related condition if the new injury aggravates that condition. So if he had a prior rotator cuff tear or had prior surgery or even had a prior case, if there's medical evidence, diagnostic evidence to show the rotator cuff tear was bigger or increased, that can be a work-related case. Also, the fact that he worked for many years, was able to do so until this new injury, bows in his favor in that case, and showing that that aggravation certainly did something to increase his problems.
Okay. And here's a person who called in who was put on disability from workers' compensation, put in all the rehab, all the restrictions and everything that they had to go through. They're still receiving workers' compensation, but they're being denied the doctor visit payments and things along those lines. So what does he do in that case?
Yeah. So I'm not sure why they're denying the doctor's visits. Strange if they're paying off-work benefits but denying the doctor's visits. I would, if I was him, find out why, number one, they're denying the benefits. And if he's not happy with the answer or the answer doesn't seem right, maybe consult with an attorney and talk to him and say, hey, I got injured, they're paying off-work benefits, they're not paying my medical bills. There's got to be an explanation why. And to find out why, and if he's not happy with the answer, then consult an attorney.
You also represent a lot of first responders.
I do.
Which they're in harm's way every day. And when I think of a workplace injury, I guess I don't think of a first responder, but they're the ones who are dealing with this all the time.
I got a special spot for them. It's one of the reasons why I went on my own in 2014. I wanted to represent more. A friend of mine got injured as a police officer, and that was one of my first cases. They're in harm's way. They have a thankless job. They're out there fighting crime. They're put in positions where they got to carry heavy weight. They're put in altercations, and I have a soft spot for them, and I do have a lot of cases, and their cases are very serious, and they should be treated appropriately. And
a lot of these cases that you deal with obviously comes down to money.
Yeah.
I mean, how do you put a value on a case? You have an equation, basically, that you look at that helps you to put a value on the case.
Right.
What is that?
The legislature has thrown out pain and suffering, and on the chart that's on the monitor, that's the last point, no pain and suffering. So they will not give you compensation or money for pain and suffering. But what they look at and what the arbitrator looks at in evaluating the case and the attorneys are those points of the occupation of the person, the age of the person. Also, they look at future earnings capacity, whether or not they've lost earnings. And then the employer has the right to have an AMA examination, a doctor look at it and give a rating. The arbitrator is bound to look at those factors and weigh them out. And then the last factor the arbitrator looks at and weighs out is the diagnosis, the care and treatment, and how they're doing at time of trial. And the arbitrator will look at all those factors, weigh them out, and then decide a percentage of disability to that person.
So there is kind of an equation for it. What out of those things is, you think, the most important for someone to think about or consider when they're in this situation?
Well, I think the most important one's the last factor, the treatment you have, how you recovered, whether or not you have restrictions, are you able to go back to work? And I think that's an important factor. And that factor is laid out at trial. It's a testimony of the person. And the arbitrator gets to know you then. The arbitrator gets to hear your story, and the arbitrator gets to hear how you're doing. The other factors are important, but I think the more important factor is the diagnosis, the treatment, and what happened in your case.
You mentioned maximum medical improvement. What's that mean?
Maximum medical improvement is when the injured person is done treating. And I think we have a fantastic doctors in the area. Great care, they're great people, and they give fantastic care of the injured people. They determine when someone's done treating. It's the most I can do for you. You're great, go back to work, and that's maximum medical improvement. So the medical bill train ends, the medical treatment ends, and the doctor says max medical improvement. Also, the client gets to determine a little bit of max medical improvement in that measure your complaints. How are you doing? You know, you think you need any more medical care? Are you fine when you're back to work?
Is it okay if a client says, you know what, I feel like I can go back to work? Is that going to play a part in their case, though?
It does. And I encourage my clients to go back to work 3 to 4 months first. See how you do. Don't end the case the day you go back to work, because what happens, you can't go back to work. So what I do is I encourage my clients to see how they're doing, a few months going back to work, and then we can talk about settling the case. Never rush into it. Make sure you get back to work and make sure you're doing okay from a medical standpoint.
And it's not just the doctors saying, well, you're ready to go. The patient really needs to have weigh in on this, too.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. And the patient needs to let the doctors know and let their attorney know, hey, this is how I'm feeling, this is how I'm doing. A lot of times I see my clients, they want to get back to work. And they try to go back to work quickly, and sometimes they want to rush it. Some people want to settle the case faster than they want to, and that's where the attorney's got to step in and talk to them, give them the advice, and like I said, it's the client's case. We've got to listen to them, and we give them our advice, and we'll listen to each other and get a game plan.
A lot of things to think about and a lot of things to really discuss before you decide which way you want to go. You focus a lot on technology in your practice to make it a little more convenient for your clients.
My office is completely paperless, something we dedicate ourselves a couple of years to do. We have no paper. We're able to get into every file, every medical record, every wage statement, just a click of the finger. So we have people covering the whole state. I have 3 attorneys that are fantastic. I have a great team put together. My staff is fantastic. And we're able to get a response to our clients as soon as possible. If you call in asking about your case, we can get into the file no matter where we're at and give you the answer.
And I like how you said off camera that you actually do Skype with some of your clients if they can't get here.
Yeah, absolutely, because I think it's important. I think it's important. They hired me as their attorney. I'm grateful for that, and I think I have an obligation to keep them informed, and that's what we try to do.
Well, believe it or not, we are almost out of time for the show, so it went pretty fast.
It did.
Well, I want to thank you for joining us today. Any last words you've got?
Just thank you very much, WEK. Thank you to you, and I want to thank my clients also.
And if you would like to give him a call, right here on your screen is the address and phone numbers, and also the website, StephenKellyLaw.com, and located at 2710 Knoxville Avenue. The phone number there to give you a call, and you're looking at personal injury as well as workers' compensation and also helping first responders.
Helping first responders with a disability also.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us, and
thank
you for joining us on this edition of Ask the Attorney. Have a great night.
Ask the Attorney is brought to you by Stephen Kelly Law.